Bible Worm, reading the Bible with Bible Worm.
Welcome to Bible Worm, getting to the core of the biblical text. I'm Dr. Robert Williamson, professor of religious studies at Hendrix College and theologian in residence of Canvas Community in Little Rock, Arkansas.
And I'm Dr. Amy Robertson, Director of Lifelong Learning and Music at Congregation Or Hadash in Sandy Springs, Georgia. We're here every week to discuss the biblical text, both as biblical scholars and as people of faith, one Jewish, one Christian.
This week, we're continuing our series on Revelation and resistance with the letters to the 7 churches in Revelation 2, 1-7, and 3, 1-22. We note that most of the churches receive both praise and admonition from Jesus, celebrating what they have done well, but warning them against their shortcomings. But we also notice that in these letters, appearances can be deceiving. Those churches that appear poor and powerless are said to be wealthy and powerful in the kingdom of God, while those that appear to be wealthy and successful make Jesus want to puke. While Jesus is addressing the churches of Asia Minor, the repeated phrase, "Let those who can hear listen to what the Spirit is saying," suggests that these letters are meant for our communities too. What would Jesus want to celebrate about our communities, we wonder? And how might he critique us? How do we appear from the empire's perspective? And what might we look like in God's eyes? Thanks for joining us. Hey, Amy, it's Bible Worm time.
Hello, Bobby.
We are continuing our series on Revelation and resistance today. We are moving yet still backwards in the book because Williamson is insane. To the letters to the churches in chapters 2 and 3. So we're going to see, we're picking up where we ended 3 weeks ago, and we're going to see what Jesus in this vision that John has to say to the churches.
Yes, that's right. And okay, so yesterday when I was reading this text, a friend of mine was texting me about, she has some a bunch of teens she's raising, and I'm sure this is true of younger children too, but it's especially true of teens. They really get themselves into some social situations, and you feel badly for them, but like, they did it to themselves.
Yeah.
Sometimes not, but sometimes you're like, oh, sweet child, like my heart breaks for you, and you made some kind of mess. So anyway, my friend just texted me about this. I was like, well, my friend is Catholic, and I was like, well, I am reading from the book of Revelation right now, and I am going to find parenting advice for you in whatever I'm reading. So give me 30 minutes, and I will give you some advice. So I think as we read today, we should try to
the Jewish scholar and educator, gave parenting advice to a Catholic friend.
Yes.
About how to parent a teen based on the letters to the churches in Revelation 2 and 3.
That is correct.
Can I ask what the advice was in general?
Well, it had sort of 2 parts. One was, I feel like a lot of these letters are sort of a combination of like, I love you.
Yeah. Get
yourself together.
Yeah.
But there was also some like, if you do, you can get, and so I said, maybe those sort of carrots will help. So I said, a fancy new outfit.
Oh, yeah.
And a very special snack.
Yeah.
And this is going to be the one that will really get the teenager, a tattoo.
Oh.
But the tattoo is going to be, you have to write the name of your God and also the one who has told you about your God on yourself. So I suggested that she let her teenager get a tattoo on one wrist of the word Jesus and on the other wrist of Mama. And that would remind her at all times not to do whatever ridiculous thing she has in mind to do.
That is amazing. And if that didn't work as a carrot, you could also make that into a stick where you're like, if you don't shape up, I'm going to make you.
Yes, exactly. Well, right. Like just the tattoo is the carrot. And then I was like, oh yeah, but we could really twist this and make it a little bit like, is it a carrot?
Yeah.
Getting mama tattooed on your wrist? I don't know.
Yeah. That's amazing, Amy.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Yeah,
what
I
are the
think so.
characteristics of these letters that you have a much nicer way of saying it? I call it big butt theology, which is that they say like, is that appropriate? Can I say that on an Apple? I
It
don't
took
know.
me a minute to get there with you, but I'm there. I got
Because there's 7 letters, of course, and 3 of them, the sort of paradigm of them is they say some good things, and then Jesus says, but, and then he says some kind of not good things, and then there's a conclusion. And so like that's the sort of basic framework is like the way you were saying it. It may be a little bit of a sandwich, right? Like here's some good stuff, here's some bad stuff, here's like you were saying, here's the good bit. So yeah, I mean, that's so interesting, that parenting advice and also advice to Christians, and in this context, an encouragement for some churches and a warning against some churches. And then a little bit of a like, you're a little bit in a gray area right here, which is actually kind of the standard in these letters.
That's right. So true to life.
Amy, we talked a little bit in the first week about Jesus, the image John has of Jesus with a 2-edged sword coming out of his mouth that speaks truth. And I think of that image when I think about these letters, because in this idea of there's a but in the middle of the message, these messages, most of them can cut you one way or the other. And it's not clear whether it's going to cut for you or against you. There's both a like encouragement and a warning in many of these letters. And so I think those images might be related.
No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah.
So there's 7 letters, and we decided that reading all 7 letters might be a little bit of a lot. And so we're going to read 4 of them. We're in 2, 1-7, and then 3, 1-22. And that'll give us kind of a sampling of the different sorts of messages that Jesus has for these churches in the revelation to John. I don't know if there's anything we need to say to get us ready to read these letters.
Probably not a lot. If there are readers who are new to Revelation, here are just some things that I had to remind myself of for context that we for sure have already talked about. But so in chapter 1, we learn that John is on the island of Patmos, and we get this description of an encounter he has that has someone who looks like a very special human who we determine to be Jesus, who has 7 stars and 7 lampstands. And we're told that the stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and we're told that the lampstands are the 7 churches, and that this speaker, Jesus, is giving John messages to be delivered to the different churches. And so that's what we're getting in this chapter, is this is the information that he is to communicate.
Yes. Good. That's super helpful. I guess the other piece is just a similar reminder that these 7 churches are 7 major cities, maybe the 7 major cities in Asia Minor at the time. And the order in which they are given here is a counterclockwise circumnavigation of Asia Minor. And so somehow or other, John is marking out the territory of Asia Minor with reference to metropolitan areas. So I think sometimes we might tend to think about the biblical text as addressing like people in like obscure places or something like that in the first century, but it's really writing to Christians who are in regions that are very prosperous economic centers, political centers. Like they are Christians who are in the middle of all the stuff of the empire, and they've got to kind of decide how they're going to live. And so we see some of that like addressing of people who live, I mean, honestly, in a situation kind of like I live in, which is somebody, I mean, Little Rock is not one of the major cities, but you know what I mean? Like I am in the middle of the cultural things, and I have to make some decisions about what that means for me as a follower of Jesus. So we're going to start out in 2, 1-7, and then we'll skip down to 3, 1-22. This first part is the letter to the church in Ephesus, which was the capital city of Asia Minor. John says, well, this is actually Jesus giving an instruction to John. Write this to the angel of the church in Ephesus. These are the words of the one who holds the 7 stars in his right hand and walks among the 7 lampstands. I know your works, your labor, and your endurance. I also know that you don't put up with those who are evil. You have tested those who say they are apostles but are not, and you have found them to be liars. You have shown endurance and put up with a lot for my name's sake, and you haven't gotten tired. But I have this against you. You have let go of the love you had at first. So remember the high point from which you have fallen. Change your hearts and lives and do the things you did at first. If you don't, I'm coming to you. I will move your lampstand from its place if you don't change your hearts and lives. But you have this in your favor. You hate what the Nicolaitans are doing, which I also hate. If you can hear, listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches. I will allow those who emerge victorious to eat from the tree of life, which is in God's paradise. So this begins with Jesus telling John to write these things to the angel of the church in Ephesus. And then somehow the people in the church are hearing it, and then also we are sort of overhearing it. So there's lots of layers going on here. I'm just curious, what do you think the effect is of writing it to the angel?
I didn't even notice that until you read it aloud. I just thought as it was written to the church. I mean, I guess an angel, if you think about an angel sort of in Hebrew Bible, Hebrew language terms, an angel is a messenger.
Yes.
It's the same word in Hebrew.
Right.
And so if we think of it that way, then if I just hear the word angel, I think more of guardian angel, someone who's looking out for you kind of thing, which feels a little different.
Yes.
If it is sort of a messenger, like a conduit from the divine world to the church, that makes a little more sense. But then it's a little weird that it goes through John. Instead of God just telling the angel.
Just telling the angel. That is true.
Angel.
Yeah.
What do you make of the fact that we're working through the angel here?
I like what you're saying there about the angel. I think that's right. So the angel has a messenger function. The angels in the book of Daniel and in Jewish apocalyptic literature, sort of in this couple centuries around this text, also have a role in, nations have angels that represent them in the heavenly realm or something. And they sometimes support each other and they sometimes fight with each other. And so there's this sort of reflection of heavenly realm, earthly realm. So this seems to be that kind of image, but instead of a nation, it's a church. So the angel has a dual function, I think. One is what you are saying, which is to be a messenger to the church and let the church know what's happening in the heavenly realm. Angels in the Jewish apocalyptic literature also have the role of being sort of observers and note takers. I think we might have talked about this a little bit last week, that just watch what people do or what nations do and write them down. And this becomes the basis of judgment later, either good or bad. And so I think this idea that a church has an angel both is to say you have a defender in the heavenly realm and a conduit to God's will. And also that look, God knows what's up in your community because the angel is like a homeroom monitor or something like that. So both is a comfort, I've got an angel, but also a little bit I got an angel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jesus describes himself here. I don't know how to talk about this because Jesus is talking to John about Jesus. And we're reading John. Anyway, these are the words of the one who holds the 7 stars and walks among the 7 lampstands. So this is the image we want to have as we listen to Jesus talk to us if we're in Ephesus. How do you make sense of that image in particular here?
I have to say, I think it's particularly lovely to think of Jesus as walking among the churches. We talked a couple weeks ago about the lampstands being sort of this light of God, and they each have 7 lights on them, and there are 7 of them, and so there's sort of amplification of the light before God, and this idea of Jesus just sort of walking among them, among a garden of tulips. It sounds almost like God walking through the Garden of Eden, like just this general presence, I think, is really quite lovely. And the 7 stars in his right hand, I don't know, I'm thinking about the right hand maybe as the sort of like your helpers are in your right hand.
Yeah.
And that's where the angels of the churches are. So he's got all his helpers in his hand.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
The image of the lampstand is really lovely here. And I like that connection that you're making. These letters all introduce Jesus as a speaker and reference back to some part of that image that we talked about 3 weeks ago in Revelation 1. Here it's about the walking among the lampstands and holding the stars in his hand. And it is a really beautiful image. And I like that, like Jesus as the gardener, Jesus as the lamp tender who wants the lamps to yield their best light. It's really lovely.
You just made that so much better the way you said that.
Oh, I was just saying what you said.
No, you said something better. Continue.
That image gets flipped down in verse 5. I mean, I'm skipping ahead here, but the lampstand, if you don't do what I'm asking you to, I'm going to take your lampstand from its place. And so there is both this like Jesus tending the lamps in some kind of way, and also like, I'm right here and I can remove your lampstand from the temple.
Yeah.
I'm just curious about that. I mean, that's an interesting kind of threat. Do you have thoughts about the implications of that threat?
I found it a little curious because I might have been too concrete about it, but I was like, if the lampstand is the church, is he threatening to remove the church? And like, what does that mean? Or is he threatening to sort of take some special status from the church as a sort of light bearer or, witness bearing entity?
I think you could read it either of those ways as like the church is going to be destroyed, or you could read it as like Jesus is going to disown the church and like it can do whatever it wants, but it is no longer truly a church. Maybe. I tend to read it as like I'm going to destroy you, but I don't know.
Yeah. No, I mean, I guess that's what it is. It's so funny, Bobby, because not having read these before, I didn't know they were going to get harsh at the end.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I probably should have guessed, but this starting as this, it just felt like it felt so good to me, this first part.
Yeah.
Like, I see you. Like,
Yeah.
I know your toil and your patient endurance. Like, I see all these good things that you are doing and all the things you bear for the sake of my name, and you have not grown weary. Like, I just felt like, oh, to be seen truly and deeply from your God, like, wow. And then I read the next line and I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Uh-oh, you've been seen.
Yeah. No, that's really important. And I think that's the rhetorical strategy of these letters is to make you feel exactly that way. And if you imagine yourself being in that church in Ephesus and hearing this, I think that would be exactly your journey. Let's talk about that first part that was so, like, felt so good to you about, I mean, specifically, I know your works, your labor, your endurance. You don't put up with those who are evil. You tested those who say they are apostles but aren't, and you figured out that they were liars. Like, that's an interesting kind of list of things. What did you notice in there? What did you do with that list?
I think I got the sense, first of all, that like there's a constancy about what they're doing. They don't give up when it gets hard or when they get tired. And they're not naive.
Yeah.
So I got a sense that, I mean, maybe from the very beginning, your toil and your patient endurance, like they're working hard all the time to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Which is quite a good, I mean,
that's
where it's at. And that's something that is often not seen, like precisely not seen, that, that it's not like it doesn't say they're doing these big flashy things and bringing fame and honor and glory to Jesus's name. It's like, you're doing the work.
That's really well said. And, I mean, I think it is clear here that being a follower of Jesus in these major cities is work, and it requires perseverance and endurance. And I think, so first of all, affirming that is true. And if you're doing that work, then good on you. And also, I think for those of us who are overhearing this letter to think, if it's too easy being a Christ follower in my own place and time, then maybe I have misunderstood the task or something like that.
Yeah.
The other thing that I notice in here, it's said a couple of times, those who say they are apostles but aren't, and you found them to be liars. We talked last week that the land beast looks like a lamb, but speaks like a dragon. And I think that could mean all sorts of things. But one of the things that I think it means is that there are people who are claiming to be followers of the Lamb who appear to be Christ followers who are actually doing the work of the empire. And they're among you, like they are trying to be in your church in Ephesus, and you figured it out. They get named later, I think, in verse 6, you hate the Nicolaitans. I think that verse 6 reference is back to that verse 2 reference. And so the Nicolaitans seem to be some kind of Christian group who are claiming to be Christ followers, but really are doing something that's not actually following the Lamb. This seems to be one of the themes that goes on here, is that people, things are not always what they seem.
Yes, for sure. Things are not always what they seem. I would imagine in this period of time when, maybe it's true in every period of time, but while sort of the church is in formation and figuring out what it means, and there's a lot of sort of internal arguments about who really is Christian in the right way and who is not Christian in the right way, I feel like there's more likely to be more rhetoric about, people who are claiming to be Christian and they maybe really do think they are.
Yeah, no, I think so.
And you need to decipher for yourself that you don't think they are. It's a really painful thing if we imagine in our world now, people who claim that some aspect of Christianity is not Christianity.
Right.
Or same, sort of within the Jewish community, that we're sort of policing the boundaries of a label that other people also claim as their own label. And it gets very, very painful and complicated. And, this group seems not to have shied away from the fact that it is painful and complicated. And that's really to their credit.
It's interesting because in my own sort of way of being in the world, I want to let people just be who they are. And this letter is saying, good for you for recognizing that those people who claim your same allegiance are not actually who they say they are. And that's very uncomfortable for me as a person who kind of wants to.
It's a judgment. You're judging them.
Yeah.
You are. And this is saying you're judging them rightly, and it's important that you do so. But that's very uncomfortable for my modern American heart,
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
We don't know historically exactly who the Nicolaitans were. We don't have a lot of reference to them outside of the book of Revelation. But many scholars think that they are Christian followers of Jesus who are accommodationist to the Roman Empire. So maybe they're willing to go to the temple. Maybe they're willing to sacrifice to the Roman gods. Maybe they're willing to eat meat that was sacrificed to those gods. The basic argument about them is that they think there is no conflict between being a good Christian and being a good Roman citizen. And the book of Revelation, as we have seen the last couple of weeks, thinks that those two ideas, following Jesus, following the emperor, are incompatible, almost completely so. And so this sort of middle ground Christian, which I find myself a lot of times sort of in that category of somebody who thinks there's basically no conflict here. And Revelation is saying, no, there really is. And you need to be aware and name it for what it is. The big but in this letter to Ephesus is in verse 4. So he's just said, you endure, you've put up with a lot, you haven't gotten tired. The thing that I have against you is you let go of the love you had at first. And think about how far you have fallen. So you were talking about how when you got to that but, you were sort of had a sort of emotional response to it of oh no, I've been seen. Oh no, I've been seen. So, I'm curious what that was like and what you think the love the emphasis on losing your love.
Yeah. Oh, it's so sort of like, I don't know, poignant is maybe a weak word to use there, but I think especially in the context of a community that has been called like really hardworking and like persistent, and they're doing the work, and they're doing hard work every day in the name of the church. And yeah, it is really easy when you sort of get focused, like sort of heads down, like we're just doing it, we're just getting through it, to lose track of the love, the sort of like emotional heart component of what had you doing this in the first place. It is really easy to lose track of that.
It is.
I don't know, a little bit I want to be like, yeah, but they're doing the real thing. But that's just that's like a mirror to myself about what I think constitutes the real thing. So I'll have to think about that.
I have a similar response, which is like, this is such a high bar to like work and endure and put up with persecution and like weed out the liars and like, I gotta love them while I gotta love doing all that too. Like, come on. But I mean, I appreciate, like, I really like what you're saying is like the whole thing is motivated out of love. And like, that's the core of the Hebrew scripture, love God, love neighbor. And as you point out so often and rightly, that love is not just about doing the right thing, but it's doing the right thing with the right attitude toward God and neighbor. And like, so this is like fundamental, like this is like faithful living 101 is you've got to have love behind your actions. It just kind of feels like a lot.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot.
So then we get the change your hearts and lives, or repent is the traditional language. If you don't, I'm coming to you. And so here the coming to you is a threat. Mm-hmm. Coming to you can be a positive thing.
That's right. That's exactly right.
And so it's like you can't get too comfortable, right? You're doing all this good stuff, but I'm going to come to you. And when I come, I'm going to take away your lampstand.
Does that make you love me?
I know, right?
Yeah, but that, I will say in this context, that word repent, because I translate it in my mind to the sort of Hebrew idea of return, like turn back, just go back to where you were. It's not, you're just like, you can do this. It's not like the image here of falling is difficult because then you have to climb back up, but just returning to the path you were on.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And he says that at the end of verse 4, you have let go of the love you had at first. Like,
yes, that's right.
You are able to do it. And how do I know? Because you used to do it. Mm-hmm. And so go back to that. I like your change between like turn around and go back instead of like you fell off a cliff and now you got to climb back up. That seems more manageable to me. In verse 7, he says, if you can hear, what is the NRSV in verse 7?
Let anyone who has an ear listen.
I like that translation a lot because to me it feels invitational to me as a reader.
Yes.
All the churches get this statement at the end. Let those who have an ear listen. And so the way that I have understood that is this letter to Ephesus is not just to Ephesus.
Yes.
But it's to you and me. It's to the reader that we sort of think about, like, wait, are we enduring? Are we persevering? Like, where do we fall in this set of good things? And then to reflect also on, like, have we lost the love that we had? And do we need to find a way back to the love? Is that how you kind of took that?
Yes. Yeah. No, I like that draws the reader into it. Mm-hmm.
The reward here is not about tattooing your mom's name on your wrist, but it's about, there's going to come though, isn't it? Mm-hmm. It's about eating from the tree of life in God's paradise.
Yeah.
What do you do with that image?
I mean, it's, this probably what had me thinking about God walking in the garden as the gardener in the beginning when I said, Jesus walking among the lampstands, because it takes me back to Eden. And I was trying to think like, this is a tree that was never prohibited from Adam and Eve. This isn't the tree they weren't supposed to eat from. So it's not like it's not a new thing in that way. It's not a new permission in that way, but it is like the ultimate tshuva, the ultimate returning, like turn the clock all the way back to a time when humans could eat from that tree, this time in the paradise of God, which I imagine would be the heavenly realm.
I think that's right. And it's also anticipating Revelation 21 and 22, in which New Jerusalem comes to earth and the trees of life are there and people do get to eat from them.
Oh, that's nice.
And so it's pointing backwards, as you're saying, to Genesis, and pointing forwards. So we I like that language of the ultimate change your hearts and lives, like the whole trajectory of history, like reverses itself.
Yeah.
Or completes itself back in a new form of where it started or something.
Yeah, you can get back there to that time before things were hard and complicated.
Exactly.
Hi, I'm Reverend Joanna Heriter, pastor of Peace Mennonite Church in Lawrence, Kansas. Last year was my first year preaching through the narrative lectionary, and Bible Worm quickly became my first and usually most significant Bible study tool each week. I love the lighthearted yet in-depth textual analysis and the attention to issues of social justice. Sometimes I just want to take Amy and Bobby's closing thoughts and offer that as my sermon. But I don't, I promise. This year, I decided to support Bible Worm financially and join their Patreon at the basic $4 a month level. If you're one of those responsible preachers who start sermon prep more than 5 days before the sermon, you can support at a slightly higher level to get early access to the content. Just go to patreon.com/BibleWormPodcast. Let's all do our little bit to help Bobby and Amy continue creating this valuable resource. And now back to this week's podcast.
Okay, Amy, we're going to move to chapter 3. The rest of chapter 2 has 3 letters to churches in Smyrna, Pergamum, and Thyatira. 2 of those churches, Thyatira and Pergamum, are kind of similar to Ephesus. They have, here's the good things, but here's the bad things. The church in Smyrna only gets good things. There's not a but in there. The line that's really interesting to me is, I know your hardship and your poverty, though you are actually rich. In verse 9, there's a sense in which this church is seen as like struggling, doesn't have resources, maybe isn't growing like a church should grow or something. But in the eye of God, it's actually the rich church. So there's a sort of things are not what they seem here in the good way, right? It appears that you are not successful, but in fact, you really are.
That's beautiful, Bobby. I'm glad you lifted out that point.
And Smyrna's right there next to you in Atlanta.
I know there's a Smyrna, not far from
Smyrna.
Smyrna.
Yeah.
So I've never actually been there. Maybe I'll go.
Yeah.
Sounds like a good place.
It's a great place. Only good things happen there. But it's a real struggle.
It's good to know it's possible to get only a good report.
All right. So we're in 3:1. Write this to the angel of the church in Sardis. These are the words of the one who holds God's 7 spirits and the 7 stars. I know your works. You have the reputation of being alive, and you are, in fact, dead. Wake up and strengthen whatever you have left, teetering on the brink of death. For I've found that your works are far from complete in the eyes of my God. So remember what you have received and heard. Hold on to it and change your hearts and lives. If you don't wake up, I will come like a thief, and you won't know what time I will come upon you. But you do have a few people in Sardis who haven't stained their clothing. They will walk with me clothed in white because they are worthy. Those who emerge victorious will wear white clothing like this. I won't scratch out their names from the scroll of life, but will declare their names in the presence of my Father and his angels. If you can hear, listen what the Spirit is saying to the churches. What did you make of the way that this church is being described?
A couple things were interesting to me. One is that it's very vague. I don't really know what's happening there, except that they seem to have a good reputation, maybe, a name of being alive, but they're not. So I don't know if that means sort of like a reputation or sort of like appearances, like they have sort of an appearance of vibrancy, or maybe even an appearance of a vibrant life in Jesus, but it actually has no core to it.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's sort of totally infiltrated with things that would soil your clothing.
It's so interesting that the Smyrna church that we were talking about a minute ago was thought to be poor, but was in fact rich. And here you
Yes.
have a church that has a reputation of being alive, but it's actually dead. And so we get this sort of like these opposites that are showing us that things the way they appear through the lens of the empire are not the way that they appear in reality, according to Revelation, which is the perspective of God. I think you're right that this is a church that, I don't know if it's other Christians or if it's people in the city of Sardis. I don't know. But it seems to like people look at it and are like, wow, look at that church. It's doing amazing stuff. And when Jesus looks at it, he's like, you guys are dead. You guys are asleep. Like wake up. I'm so interested in that. Like, there's no specifics here. And I was trying to think, like, what would you do if you were a member of the church in Sardis and you got this letter?
That's a great question.
There's not an action plan here.
There's not an action plan, which is actually a really sort of interesting invitation. Okay, this is a little bit weird, this connection I'm making in my mind, but I don't know. I was listening to some podcast that had nothing to do with religion. Maybe it was Freakonomics or something like that. It was about like failing, like, I don't know, how to fail or something. And it was about this guy who in a business context would come up with this whole model and have his whole sort of board leadership work through it. And then at the end, he would sort of play this thought game. And the game was, he would say, okay, imagine it's 5 years down the road. This has totally failed. Take 10 minutes and write down for me why it failed. And he said, even though he always asked people beforehand, do you see any weaknesses in this? And they would say no. Through this game where you say, like, you're sort of taking the pressure off and saying, like, it has failed. Tell me why it's failed. They uncover all kinds of things by just imagining that is already true.
Yeah.
And so it is actually, for me, a really interesting thought exercise to think, like, let's say you think you're alive, but I'm telling you you're dead. Why is that true? Like, if you were to actually know that your community was spiritually dead, like, okay, that's bad. But it opens up a different conversation just to jump to that end point. And I bet people do know a lot of what's wrong, but they won't name it until they have to.
I love that. I kind of want to do that with my own community, but also I don't want to do that.
I know, that's why you need someone to threaten you like a thief.
Yeah. I mean, the clear message here is you should not take the appearance of being successful as an indication that you actually are successful.
Right.
And that maybe there's a danger of the empire thinking that you are successful.
And the more kinds of sort of, I don't know, external success you have, the more people have ideas about what you should be doing. And you feel pressured to respond to all, like it does, it gets confusing.
Oh, I like that way of thinking about it. Like, we started out doing the right thing, and then people were drawn to us, and they had certain expectations that we should, whatever, do things that like draw in more people. And then we start gathering people who don't understand what the mission was in the first place, and we lose our way.
Yeah.
The language of wake up is so, culturally resonant.
Yes.
Ta-Nehisi Coates has that really beautiful essay that talks about the American dream as being a state of sleepfulness, and that you can only live the American dream if you're asleep to what is really happening. That kind of hits me with this letter.
Yeah, there's a teaching, I think, from Maimonides that the reason we blow the shofar every day in the month leading up to Rosh Hashanah is because we're sleeping. And you need someone to aggressively wake you up.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I love that. Yeah. So it's not all bad news for everyone in Sardis. The church as a whole has lost its way and has fallen asleep, but there are some people who are worthy and their clothing hasn't been stained. So their names won't get marked out of the scroll of life. So how do you envision those people, or what's being said about them?
I think it's interesting that in light of the sort of empire-y conversation we're having with this church, this sort of marker of their, attentiveness to Jesus or to right things is their clothing.
Yeah.
Because clothing is so often a marker of your loyalties and of your status and of who you belong to. And I would imagine if they're a wealthy city, then there are things that wealthy people wear. It's the ultimate appearance status thing. And so to have people who would choose the proverbial white robe or the actual white robe, I don't know, seems like a nice metaphor, a nice grounding place for what is being asked here.
So before the gift given to those who persevere was to be able to eat from the tree of life, here it's to have their names not scratched out of the scroll of life. And so they'll be able to be in the presence of God. I just think that name, like that idea of a scroll where names have been written, but your name could get erased everything feels so tentative in this book. Like, okay, you can never just be satisfied that your name's written in the scroll. And so I'm good now and I can take my foot off the gas.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, your name is there, but it could be scratched out.
I think that's such an important, counterpoint to the idea that once you believe in Jesus or accept Jesus or whatever, that like you're good, you're done.
Yeah.
And there may be other places that would say something more to that effect, but Revelation is not saying that.
Revelation is not saying that at all.
Yeah.
Right, picking up in verse 7, to the church in Philadelphia. Write this to the angel of the church in Philadelphia. These are the words of the one who is holy and true, who has the key of David. Whatever he opens, no one will shut, and whatever he shuts, no one opens. I know your works. Look, I have set in front of you an open door that no one can shut. You have so little power, and yet you have kept my word and haven't denied my name. Because of this, I will make the people from Satan's synagogue, who say they are Jews and really aren't, but are lying. I will make them come and bow down at your feet and realize that I have loved you. Because you kept my command to endure, I will keep you safe through the time of testing that is about to come over the whole world to test those who live on the earth. I'm coming soon. Hold on to what you have so that no one takes your crown. As for those who emerge victorious, I will make them pillars in the temple of my God, and they will never leave it. I will write on them the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the new Jerusalem that comes down out of heaven from my God. I will also write on them my own name. If you can hear, listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches. So, Amy, here we have another letter like the one in Smyrna where there's no but. It's all to the good. I'm curious what you notice and hear about why Jesus favors this church and what they seem to be doing that is good.
Well, they have little power and yet, persevere through that. And so we can imagine that it's when you have little power, it's harder to get caught up in the systems of power because they don't want you.
Yeah.
So maybe they don't have that temptation.
I think that's right. And I think that's so interesting in these letters that you appear successful, but you're not. You appear powerless, but you actually are doing great. And there does seem to be this motif of if you're not able to succeed in the system, that means you're doing something right.
Yeah.
So here we have that sort of empire versus lamb or whatever, however you want to think about it. And that the appearances of the one system are the opposite of the appearances in the other.
Bobby, then it seems like it doesn't talk a whole lot more about what they're doing.
Yeah.
What I mostly see is, that they're keeping on with their endurance, but it talks, about the synagogue of Satan. I'm not gonna form a congregation called that, but could be like a rock band. I don't know.
Yeah.
Probably not. Like these sort of challenges that are around them and the ways in which like Jesus is going to shelter them or save them or protect them from those things and from all that will come during his own coming. Mostly I get the sense of their sort of powerlessness.
So much in Revelation is about not giving in. right? This idea of endurance and perseverance, and we're not talking. I mean, maybe we're talking about like something like the Sermon on the Mount, like there's a certain way to live, but we're not foregrounding that. We're foregrounding there are forces in the world that are trying to get you to live differently than you should, and you like endure against those forces. So there is this like constant pressure on you to be different than you should be, which I think is, I just think that's so interesting to think about, especially given the images of the beasts that are trying to get you to worship Satan, not realizing that that's what you're doing. Like there's so many ways that can happen to you. And the core of it is to resist that.
Yeah. I feel like there's so much language in here that focuses on that sense of like endurance to me, like the language of hold fast to what you have, like just hold on, continue to endure. This language of I will make you a pillar in the temple, like very sturdy, ever present. Yeah, that sense of like constancy, strength in the face of their relative powerlessness.
That image of the pillar is really interesting, because before the churches were lampstands that could be removed, and here now they're pillars that can never be removed. And so it's like if you just get through this period in which you are sort of vulnerable, then there's a more stable time that is to come. Yes. And you can get there.
Yes.
Those pillars have those names written on them, which I guess is where you got the idea of tattooing God's name and Jesus' name.
Oh, is it being written on the pillars? I guess that makes sense.
But the pillars are the church, right? So
I know, yes, but I saw it as like, I will make of you like metaphorically a pillar and I will write on you. I don't know what that means exactly, but yes, that was my tattoo idea.
It's reminding me of Isaiah 56, in which the eunuchs and the immigrants are given a monument in the temple. This image sort of resonates with that image for me.
No, that makes so much sense. I was thinking that the things that came to my mind were less sort of concretely about the pillar, the monument, but this idea that comes right after it, you will never go out of it. You will never go out of the temple, which is, I just feel like there's this longing in numerous Psalms to be ever, like eternally in God's presence in the house of God forever. So there's at the end of Psalm 23, Psalm 16 has wanting to be with God before you forever. And so like, I don't know, I feel like it's this sort of fantasy to be able to
I like that.
Be ever in the temple.
You were mentioning before your new band, Synagogues of Satan.
Yeah.
And here's the enemy in this, enemy might not be exactly right, but enemy's right.
yeah, that's right.
The antagonist. I'm just curious, like this verse, of course, has had a history in Christian Jewish relations that has been not a good one.
Not a great one.
I'm curious what you make of it as a Jew reading this text and reading about synagogues of Satan. What did you do with that?
It's like I was a little afraid of what it was going to be. I have heard this, vaguely sort of out in the world. It sounds pretty bad as a phrase by itself. I don't know. In the context of verse 9, it sounded more to me like the apostles who are lying, like people who are saying they're Jews and are not. It's not saying Jews actually are worshiping Satan. It's saying they're not Jews. Right. Or they're not Jews in the way that, that John thinks they're supposed to be Jews. But it doesn't sound to me like it's talking about Jews being evil or Satan worshipers. It sounds like there's a group of liars who are claiming to be Jews and are not, at least not doing it in the way that John thinks they ought to be.
Yeah. That's the way I read it too, Amy. I'm glad that that's how it appeared to you. We just had the reference in Ephesus to Christians who say they're apostles, but they aren't. And here we have another group of people of faith who say they are, but they aren't. When you read this after reading Revelation 13, you can see that all sorts of people are worshiping Satan. Like maybe most people are worshiping Satan in the Roman Empire because they get pulled into these ways of thinking about something innocuous seeming like the way they practice their faith that actually points them to the empire, which points them to Satan. And so, like, I read this as Jews who have accommodated to the Roman Empire and are not really living as Jews. And we also have seen Christians that are like that. I think that's a good way to read it. You can read this as the author of Revelation thinks the only way to be Jewish is to follow Jesus. And therefore, all non-Jesus following Jews belong to this category. And I think that's a legitimate way to read it. I don't find it a helpful way to read it, but I think you could read it that way.
There's a little sort of excursus in my study Bible, the Jewish Annotated New Testament, and it imagines that maybe what he's talking about is Gentiles who are claiming Judaism by virtue of the fact that they are followers of Jesus, but are not actually keeping ritual law, sort of a la Paul. Who would say they don't need to keep ritual law. In which case, this excursus says that then John would say, well, then you're not Jewish. So like something in that realm. I don't know. It's a complicated sociological picture here, but
what you said there reminded me, in the Roman world, the Jews had a special provision, special protection, where they did not have to pay homage at the Roman temples. They could pay taxes to the temple in Jerusalem and not to their local temples, and they didn't have to go and participate in the cult system. And so the Romans gave them this sort of like exception. And so then there's arguments
then other
about
people want that exception.
Who wants the exception? Like who do you not want to have that exception? And so it's sort of interesting, like maybe this sort of a seemingly benevolent act on the behalf of the empire creates this division among people of faith. They have to fight over this little scrap that they get. Like that might be an interesting way to take that as well.
Yep, that makes sense.
All right, Amy, we have one more church yet to read. This is the church in Laodicea, picking up in verse 14. Write this to the angel of the church in Laodicea. These are the words of the Amen, the faithful and true witness, the ruler of God's creation. I know your works. You are neither cold nor hot. I wish that you were either cold or hot. So, because you are lukewarm and neither hot nor cold, I'm about to spit you out of my mouth. After all, you say, I'm rich and I've grown wealthy and I don't need a thing. You don't realize that you are miserable, pathetic, poor, blind, and naked. My advice is that you buy gold from me that has been purified by fire so that you may be rich, and white clothing to wear so that your nakedness won't be shamefully exposed, and ointment to put on your eyes so that you may see. I correct and discipline those whom I love, so be earnest and change your hearts and lives. Look, I'm standing at the door and knocking. If any hear my voice and open the door, I will come in to be with them, and will have dinner with them, and they will have dinner with me. As for those who emerge victorious, I will allow them to sit with me on my throne, just as I emerged victorious and sat down with my Father on his throne. If you can hear, listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches. Okay, obviously you do not want to be a recipient of this letter to Laodicea.
You are lukewarm pea soup.
Amy, there is actually a phenomenon in Laodicea where it had two water sources, one that came from the hot springs up on Helios or somewhere on top of the mountain, and one that there was cold water that came from Colossae or somewhere. But by the time they got to Laodicea, the hot one had sort of cooled off and the cold one had warmed up, and it was just like lukewarm water. So it's interesting that John seems to be playing with an actual phenomenon in Laodicea about the water supply, but he's using it in this like powerful metaphorical way. Can you talk about the metaphor and how you understand it?
I mean, again, it's so interesting because when I read the first sentence, you are neither cold nor hot, I was like, that's not necessarily bad. Like, you're balanced, and then I wish you were either cold or hot. And I was like, oh, so you want a little more fire. Like, you want a little more there.
Yeah. Pick a side. Yeah.
Yeah, pick a side. That's exactly right. That's what this feels like, is this, the people don't seem to be like actively greedy. They're not going out seeking more than they've already got. They're content with what they have, but also they think they have all there is to have. And
Right.
they're sort of, I don't know, they're trying to play both sides. Like, you got to stake your claim, and they're just milquetoast, Bobby.
Yeah. That line that is there, I want to spit you out of my mouth, is related to vomiting. So it's like, you're so lukewarm, it makes me want to puke, is basically what it says. And like that language, like if we're talking binaries here, hot and cold, and we're talking binaries here, kingdom of the Lamb, empire of Rome, then what it seems to be saying is I would rather you just pick a side, even if it's the Roman side, instead of trying to be like a comfortable merger. Like I'd rather you just be Roman followers. Then I would know what to do with you.
Well, and I feel like it goes to this theme we've had in a couple places of people who are claiming to be apostles or claiming to be Jews, but are really not. Yeah. Like it's saying like, just be what you're going to be. Like if what you want is to live in the empire, go live in the empire, but don't pretend you can do both.
I was so interested that you had interpreted them as not being greedy. And I mean, I think that might be right. But to me, it seems like the reason that they're not greedy is because they're like really freaking rich, you know?
I wasn't sure whether to read that as they are content or they are self-satisfied or they are wealthy.
That's interesting. I read them as being really rich and therefore satisfied because they're rich. And they are self-satisfied in the sense of like, I earned my wealth myself and I don't need God. I don't need the community.
Not as like the Lord is my shepherd. I have all I need.
Right.
No.
Here we get another, like this is a purely negative review, of course. And it's another one in which people seem to be successful. I'm rich, wealthy. I don't need anything. And then the interpretation of Jesus is actually you're miserable, pathetic, poor, blind, and naked. like that's harsh.
Yeah, it's harsh. Yeah.
Then he says, get rid of your gold, like your Roman gold, and get the Jesus gold. Get rid of your fancy clothes and get your white clothes. And like your fancy clothes are really your nakedness. So, I mean, it's really powerful. That's all I'm really saying.
Yeah. Yes.
This one strikes a little close to home for me. I don't know, like, I'm not a rich person by any stretch, but like in the scope of the world, like I am quite well off. And, like I'm pretty satisfied about that. And I don't want to mess it up too much. And so when I worry about these letters, I worry about the lukewarmness of Laodicea and how it might apply to me. But I can talk to my therapist about that.
No, I was going to say, it's like it would be, again, sort of like an interesting exercise to say, like, which of these letters does any given person need to sit with and figure out what it means for us.
This community at the end, so it's not all hopelessness, right? There is this idea of Jesus is standing there knocking on the door. This gets interpreted in some Christian circles as a very individual and personal, like, I want to come into your heart and like, you can claim me as your savior. And maybe it is that way, but it's in the context of this community is accommodated to the empire in ways that are vomitous. And I want to come in and be in your community, but the door is shut. But there is the possibility of having a door and Jesus comes in to eat a meal. Do you have thoughts about what that image, like what is that image evoking for you?
The image keeps throwing me back to the beginning of the last letter where Jesus is described as the one who has the key of David, who opens the doors and no one will shut it, and who shuts the doors and no one will open it.
Yeah.
And now we have Jesus knocking at the door and they have to, it adds this dimension of, I don't know if mutuality is quite the right word, but like you have to be responsive.
Yeah.
You have to be responsive to it.
The image that came to me while you were talking, which is a totally dumb image, was the Kool-Aid man. Like, just Jesus is not the Kool-Aid man who's just going to crash through the door going, oh, yeah. He's like, He's a gentle knocker, and you gotta respond and open the door.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
All right, Amy, at the end of this, we also get the invitation, if you can hear, listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches. So I'm curious, when you are reading this set of texts and you're listening to what the Spirit is saying to the churches, what are you hearing?
Bobby, we've already said this a couple times in different ways, but I think I am really interested in the experiment of like which of these letters is for you today.
Yeah.
And even if it's just sort of as a thought experiment, like let's pretend this letter is for you. What would it mean? Mm-hmm. And I also have a letter within these that I think I get very focused on that. It start with love and then get into the hard work and then stay in the hard work forever. Slightly grumpy.
Yes.
So that ding, ding, ding. Yes, that is a problem. So I think that's sort of my deep thought for now is that these letters have a really wide range of experiences that people or communities might be having in their faith life. And it's wonderful to have them written here to communities, but also with an open invitation at the end to hear the words. And I feel like that gives us a great sort of space to not feel too pointedly condemned, but also to try the sort of thought experiment of like, what if, let's pretend you are someone who looks alive but actually is dead. What does that mean for you? I think there's just a tremendous amount of fruit for self-inquiry in these letters.
I really love that way of getting at it, Amy. When I was reading this with the Bible Worm Collaborative, my suggestion was something like, the question was like, which of these churches applies to you? Mm-hmm. Which is not a very thoughtful question. And the Bible Worm Collaborative was like, I think we should probably avoid this like one-to-one, like, my church is Laodicea or my church is Philadelphia. But the way you're taking it as like, let's just say this is true about you. In what way is it true? I like that a lot. And to do that with each of those letters, like in what way have we lost the love that we had at first? Mm-hmm. In what way have we been true in the face of temptation? In what way are we lukewarm? Mm-hmm. And like, what does each of those letters have to say? I really love that. I think that's beautiful. The only other thing I think I want to add there is that there is a consistent theme in these letters, the ones that we've read, but also the other ones, that the way your community looks from the perspective of the empire is deceptive in terms of what it looks like from the perspective of God. Mm-hmm. And so the ones who are rich and self-satisfied and successful in these letters come into some really harsh critique. And the ones who appear to be struggling and suffering and powerless, those are the ones who are actually doing it right. Yeah. And so, I think there is some warning there about what does the empire think of us? And if it thinks well of us, maybe we need to check ourselves. And also an encouragement that when we struggle and the empire seems to be opposed to us, that maybe we're actually doing something right. Mm-hmm. And I think that, appearance is not reality in Revelation. And there's a lot of work to do underneath that. What does it mean to unveil that? And like, Christ is not writing a letter to me exactly. And so I don't know exactly what Christ sees when Christ looks at my community. But I think I can unpack that a little bit from what has been said here about other communities.
Yes. Oh, that is so true, Bobby. It is so hard not to look at a religious community as a business. Like, as what's your business model,
absolutely.
And I'm thinking of like, what's considered a failing church or a failing synagogue. I'm pretty sure it's the only one on here that Jesus was happy with.
Exactly.
It's rich stuff in here.
All right, Amy. Well, thanks so much for reading this text today. I love reading with you. I always see new things when I read with you, and it's just
sometimes they're there and sometimes they're not.
I was going to say, it makes my heart happy, but it also challenges me to be a better person of faith. Next time we're going to be in Revelation 7, 1-17, which is a vision of the heavenly throne room. It's going to anticipate the arrival of New Jerusalem in Revelation 21, but right in Revelation 7, we're going to see what's going on in heaven.
That sounds great. Oh gosh, I just started having new thoughts, Bobby, but I'm going to write them down for next time because it's time
Yes,
to
write
go.
them down for next time.
Okay.
All right, Amy. I like it when we end with new thoughts that we got to talk about soon.
New thoughts are good. Yeah.
I'll see you next time.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us for this week's episode of Bible Worm. If you've enjoyed this free podcast, we hope you'll help us keep it going by joining our Patreon for as little as $4 per month. You can also sign up for other goodies like early access, video lectures, weekly liturgies, and more. Visit patreon.com/BibleWormPodcast for details.
Bible Worm is produced and edited by Bobby Williamson. Our theme song is sung by Colin Bagby, and our theme music is The World at Large by Dano Songs. Many thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping make this podcast possible.
Join us next week as we continue our summer series on Revelation and Resistance with John's vision of the heavenly throne room in Revelation 7, 1-17. Until then, keep on digging.